Okay, so we're continuing today from 1 Kings 18. We've just seen Elijah foretell of the drought that God sent due to Ahab's wickedness that was going to last years. We've seen about the widow who God used to provide supernaturally for Elijah, and the revival of the widow's son who fell really sick. So we're going to crack on with chapter 18. And it came to pass after many days that the word of the Lord came to Elijah in the 3rd year, saying, Go present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the earth. So we've got here, after many days, it's in the 3rd year, so I think that's 3 years of drought, which things must be pretty desperate in the country. Imagine 3 years of no rain whatsoever. It's going to be pretty bad, but God's told him that if you go back to Ahab, I'm going to send rain on the earth. So Elijah went to present himself to Ahab, and there was a severe famine in Samaria. And Ahab had called Obadiah, who was in charge of his house. So this is a servant of Ahab, who's in charge of his house. Now Obadiah feared the Lord greatly. For so it was, while Jezebel massacred the prophets of the Lord, that Obadiah had taken 100 prophets and hidden them, 50 to a cave, and had fed them with bread and water. So this is quite a remarkable insight. So it says here Obadiah feared the Lord greatly. We see this. Sometimes you think, oh, if you fear God, does that mean you're just scared of him, you don't want to be near him? But actually, God teaches that you should have a fear of God, because he is the most powerful being in the universe. If there's anyone you don't want to upset, it is the creator of the universe. So normally when it mentions someone's fear for God in the Bible, it's actually a positive thing, because if you fear God, you will live a more righteous life. If you fear sharks, you don't get in the water. If you fear the wrath of God, you will not go near sin, because you don't want to awaken the wrath of God, and that's a good thing. And then we have here that Jezebel massacred the prophets of the Lord. So people who were serving God, she's killed them all. Now it says, because Obadiah feared God, that he took 100 prophets and hid them. Not too sure here, because it says 50 to a cave. I don't know where the other 50 went. But basically, Jezebel will have given the order that they all be killed, and Obadiah has disobeyed the orders and hidden some of God's prophets. But there will have been many who were slain. So this is the sort of woman that Jezebel was. And Ahab said to Obadiah, Go into the land, to all the springs of water, and to all the brooks. Perhaps we may find grass to keep the horses and mules alive, so that we will not have to kill any livestock. So here again, Ahab's telling Obadiah to go searching for any sign of water or grass. Things are clearly getting very desperate, because they want to keep the horses and mules alive, and they're the last animals out of all your livestock, really, that you're going to consider killing. Cows, you do that anyway. Pigs, sheep, we do tend to eat them, but you don't tend to eat horses. But things are so scarce, they're really looking for some grass so that they can keep these horses alive. So they divided the land between them to explore it. Ahab went one way by himself, and Obadiah went another way by himself. So they've split up, and they're travelling themselves around the country looking for water or grass. Now as Obadiah was on his way, suddenly Elijah met him. And he recognized him and fell on his face and said, Is that you, my lord Elijah? So here we see a respectful term towards Elijah. This is where Obadiah fears God, and so recognizes the authority that Elijah has. And he answered him, that being Elijah, It is I. Go, tell your master Elijah is here. So yep, and of course Elijah said the next time God speaks there will be rain, so he's telling him, let him know that Elijah's come. So he said, How have I sinned that you are delivering your servant into the hand of Ahab to kill me? As the Lord your God lives, there is no nation or kingdom where my master has not sent someone to hunt for you. And when they said, he is not here, he took an oath from the kingdom or nation that they could not find you. And now you say, go tell your master, Elijah is here. So here we can see that Ahab has been hunting for Elijah. And I don't think it takes a genius to realise what he would do when they found him, because they see him as the cause of this great drought. And he said, people have been sent to hunt for you, and when they said he is not here, he took an oath from the kingdom or nation that they could not find you. So making people swear that they couldn't find you. So he's now saying, what have I done against you? You want me to go and tell the king that you're here? He's going to get angry at me. And it shall soon come to pass, as soon as I am gone from you, that the Spirit of the Lord will carry you to a place I do not know. So when I go and tell Ahab, and he cannot find you, he will kill me. So this is what Obadiah is afraid of, is because Elijah's been in the wind and no one can find him. He says, what if I go to Ahab, tell him that you're here, and then you disappear, then I'm going to be killed, because he's been making people swear that whether they've seen Elijah or not. So if he gives a false report, then Ahab, he's an evil, wicked king, he'll probably kill him for it. So he said, so when I go and tell Ahab, and he cannot find you, he will kill me. But I, your servant, have feared the Lord from my youth. Was it not reported to my Lord what I did when Jezebel killed the prophets of the Lord? How I hid 100 men of the Lord's prophets, 50 to a cave, and fed them with bread and water. Now you say, go tell your master Elijah is here, he will kill me. So there you go. Obadiah is really pleading with Elijah here, like, don't ask me to go and tell him that you're here. And he's sort of pleading with Elijah, have you not heard how I saved the prophets? Like, I am with God and your cause, but please don't ask me to do this. Then Elijah said, as the Lord of hosts lives, before whom I stand, I will surely present myself to him today. So Elijah's giving him a promise, I'm going to turn up, but you need to go tell him. So Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. Then it happened, when Ahab saw Elijah, that Ahab said to him, is that you, O troubler of Israel? And he answered, I have not troubled Israel, but you and your father's house have, in that you have forsaken the commandments of the Lord, and have followed the Baals. Now therefore, send and gather all Israel to me, on Mount Carmel, the 450 prophets of Baal, and the 400 prophets of Asherah, who eat at Jezebel's table. So you've got Ahab saying, is it you, the one who's caused all this trouble? And Elijah's corrected him and said, no, I've not caused the trouble, you and your father's house have, because of the evil that they've been doing. They've broken the commandments of the Lord, and they've followed these false gods, Baals. So he said, I want you to gather all of Israel up to this mountain, and all the prophets of Baal and the prophets of Asherah. So these are the false prophets of Jezebel who eat at Jezebel's table. So this is where Jezebel was clearly very invested in this god Baal. She would keep the prophets eating at her table, eating with the king and queen. And from God's perspective, this is what makes him so angry, because Israel was his nation that he had made a covenant with, that he said he was going to use through Abraham to show people what God's people look like. And what's Ahab done? He's married a woman who's brought in another god. They've killed all the prophets of the Israel's God. And so now Elijah's saying, I want you to gather them all together, and we're going to meet on this mountain. So it's quite a curious thing. We'll see what happens. So Ahab sent for all the children of Israel, and gathered the prophets together on Mount Carmel. And Elijah came to all the people and said, how long will you falter between two opinions? So this is Elijah addressing all the people. How long will you falter between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal, follow him. But the people answered him not a word. So he's calling out to the people, choose God or choose Baal. And they said nothing. Then Elijah said to the people, I alone am left a prophet of the Lord. But Baal's prophets are 450 men. Therefore let them give us 2 bulls, so 2 male cows, and let them choose 1 bull for themselves, cut it into pieces, and lay it on the wood, but put no fire under it. And I will prepare the other bull, and lay it on the wood, but put no fire under it. Then you call on the name of your gods, and I will call on the name of the Lord, and the God who answers by fire, he is God. So this is crazy, man. This is Elijah. He's gathered all the people together and he's saying, there's one true God. Let's decide who that God is. So it might sound a bit weird that Elijah has asked them to grab a bull each, kill it and chop it up, the same as you would for eating beef. But you're going to lay it on wood, but don't put any fire under it. And if you know the traditions of the Israelites, they would do meat sacrifices to God on what they call an altar. And so an altar was basically something designed where you would light a fire to it and put meat on top of it. And in those days, because it was very hard to come by good meat, it's we live in very exuberant times now in 2023, but back when this was written, it was very hard to get by. And so to make an offering to God, if you were to take your best cows or calves and put them and burn them, and instead of eating them, you just burn them to God, this was seen as a way of making a sacrifice to God, to show that you loved him, to show respect and honor to him. And it was something that God had directed the Israelites to do. So other gods would do this as well, that they would receive what's called like offerings of sacrifice. And he's basically saying, we're going to have a test here to see whose God is real. We're going to take both bulls, let's both lay them on wood, but we're both going to call out to our gods, and we're going to see whose God will light the wood on fire. So it's a showdown, and he's pointed out that he's the only prophet of the Lord left. There may be those that were saved, but that were standing there on that day, he's the only prophet left, and there's 450 men of Baal, and he says, I'm going to take them all on and show. So all the people answered and said, it is well spoken. So this is an interesting dynamic, because you've got the king Ahab, but because all the people were there, the people have decided that this is a good test, whether Ahab or Jezebel think it is or not. I don't think Jezebel was there, actually. It doesn't say that she was there, but let's read on. So all the people answered and said, it is well spoken. Now Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, choose 1 bull for yourselves and prepare it first, for you are many, and call on the name of your God, but put no fire under it. So they took the bull which was given them, and they prepared it, and called on the name of Baal from morning even till noon, saying, O Baal, hear us. But there was no voice, no one answered them. Then they leapt about the altar which they made. So they're calling out to Baal, there's no answer, and now they're starting to leap around the altar. I assume to just show that they're really passionate to their God. But yeah, it's a bit strange, they're jumping around the altar. And so it was at noon, so they've been going for like possibly 10, maybe 9 hours. They're calling out to Baal, because it says from morning, which might be like early in the morning, till noon, 12 o'clock. So I guess morning would probably be deemed as sunrise, so maybe 6 hours or so, but a significant period of time. And so it was at noon that Elijah mocked them and said, cry aloud, for he is a god. Either he is meditating, or he is busy, or he's on a journey, or perhaps he's sleeping and must be awakened. So they cried aloud and cut themselves, as was their custom, with knives and lances, until the blood gushed out on them. So this is where Elijah is mocking them, and to show their sincerity to their God, to get their God to answer, they've started cutting themselves. And it says that as was their custom. So this was something, in a lot of pagan religions, you see people doing self-harm because they think that shows sincerity. So see what happens. And when midday was past, they prophesied until the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice. So they were saying that the evening sacrifice was going to come. But there was no voice, no one answered, no one paid attention. Then Elijah said to all the people, "Come near to me." So all the people came near to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord that was broken down. So there must have been an altar there that had been broken, and so he's restoring it. And Elijah took 12 stones according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, "Israel shall be your name." So Israel always consisted of 12 tribes, so he's taking 12 stones, which is symbolic of the tribes, and he puts them on the altar, or rebuilds the altar with them, as it says here. Then with the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he made a trench. So he's digging a trench around the altar, large enough to hold 2 seahs of seed. I don't know how big that is, to be fair, 2 seahs of seed. But he's put a trench around, and you sort of start wondering why. And he put the wood in order, cut the bull in pieces, and laid it on the wood, and said, "Fill 4 water pots with water, and pour it on the burnt sacrifice and on the wood." So this is strange. The challenge is that he's got to call for fire from God, and he's soaking it with water. This is where I love Elijah, because he's making a point. Then he said, "Do it a second time." And then they did it a second time. And he said, "Do it a third time." And they did it a third time. So the water ran all around the altar, and he also filled the trench with water. So that's where you see he's built the trench to catch the water. So you've got this altar that's soaked in water. And it came to pass at the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice, that Elijah the prophet came near and said, "Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known this day that you are God in Israel, and I am your servant, and that I have done all these things at your word. Hear me, O Lord, hear me, that this people may know that you are the Lord God, and that you have turned their hearts back to you again." So wow, what a prayer. It's where Elijah's put it all on the line. He's even soaked the altar, and he's calling out to God, not loudly, but he's just saying it with his heart, "God, please show these people that you are our God. Show them that you've not turned your backs on them, that you're still the God of Israel." Then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt sacrifice, and the wood, and the stones, and the dust, and it licked up the water that was in the trench. Now when all the people saw it, they fell on their faces, and they said, "The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God." So you've got, on the one hand, the people of Baal taking hours, self-harming, no answer. And then here you've got this incredible miracle. Can you imagine just seeing fire fall from heaven? So much so that it consumes the wood, the stones, the dust. It even licks up all the water that's in the trench. So this is not normal fire, this is like fire from heaven. And Elijah said to them, "Seize the prophets of Baal, do not let one of them escape." So they seized them, and Elijah brought them down to the brook Kishon and executed them there. So we're going to leave it there, because this is quite a long passage, but I know in 2023 people can sometimes think that the Bible is nothing but nice sayings, and that some people, I can imagine, are going to have problems with this bit, because here Elijah kills the prophets of Baal. But you have to remember that this is before Jesus, so before the new covenant, and in these times it was a lot more cutthroat, in the sense that you only have to study history a little bit to see the colonization that countries did to each other, and the warring, and that's after Jesus. But before Jesus, there was very much anarchy on the face of the earth. And here Elijah, once he's proven that God is true, he commands the people to kill these false prophets, these people who have been worshipping this false god, and they slayed all of God's prophets. And so whatever you may think, this was what Elijah did, and I think it's righteousness, to be honest. It was in that time, this was what had to be done, because these people had been proven false and the Israelites were not to tolerate them, and they had come to this country and blasphemed against their God. They had slain the prophets, and so now when Elijah exposes them to be false, the consequence is that they should be put to death. I have to say I'm glad I wasn't born in these times. It was a lot more serious to partake in religion and politics. The average lifespan at this time was very low, and so it was a very tough time. But an incredible miracle, an incredible face-off, and here you just see that Elijah's heart was, as a prophet of God, he put his life on the line to tell these people, look, I follow the one true God and I'll prove it to you. And what a statement of faith. It makes me wonder if he could hear God's voice in his ear telling him to do these things, or whether he did these things just from like a knowing that it would be pleasing to God. But either way, God heard him. And God didn't command them to kill the prophets of Baal, so it's hard to say whether that's in God's will. But at the same time, these were evil people. Baby sacrifice and self-harm was common with Baal, and insane. So we've got a fair bit more to go after this. I won't read too many of the titles so that we don't give away what's going to come, but should be a couple of days before I upload the next one. So hope you've been enjoying reading the Word with me, and I'll be back soon.